Welcome back to the Foreign Desk. I'm Lisa Daftari. As Israel and the rest of the world await Iran regime's promise of a significant retaliation, the Russian invasion of Ukraine carries on, and China and Russia grow closer than ever before. There couldn't be a better time to bring in today's guest, someone who I've wanted to have on the show for a very long time and a good friend. Let's bring in Erick Stakelbeck, journalist, author, television host at TBN, where he hosts his viral YouTube show, The Watchman, and as well as Stakelbeck Tonight. He is the author of 3 popular books on terrorism and a well-known and well-recognized Middle East and counterterrorism analyst. Welcome to the show, Erick.
Lisa, great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, I often ask my guests, and of course, you are so much in this space. Let's hear your great evaluation of our current foreign policy. A, B, C, D, or F. How do you think we're doing?
Wow. I hate to start out so doom and gloom, Lisa, but I think it's probably an F. And I think things here, I mean, look, this is no time to mince words, right? And that's why you do what you do. You do it so well. I think a few things. I think almost 3 years ago to the day, practically, August 2021, we really got a sense with the debacle in Afghanistan of where this was all heading, number one. But even go back even further, actually, Lisa, now that I think about it, January 2021, literally the first act in the foreign policy realm of the Biden administration when Joe Biden took office was to remove the Houthis from the terror list. The Iranian proxy, which obviously has gone on to cause incredible chaos and havoc in the ensuing years since. So we had an inkling in 2021 as to where this was all heading. And what do we have now? Well, we've got a major war in the Middle East, where perhaps an even larger war on the horizon, quite literally. We've got Europe on fire, the biggest land war in Europe since World War II. And we have the United States here seen by our enemies, by the enemies of the free world, as weak. There's no other way to put it, Lisa. There's a gathering storm, and you laid it out in your intro. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea as well, and they're emboldened right now. They do not fear or respect Joe Biden, and they certainly don't fear Kamala Harris. It's a very dangerous time right now, I believe, and in the next 6 months or so, Lisa, in particular, before Joe Biden leaves office in January 2025, we should all have our sensors up, because evil men are really smelling blood right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think there's such a perception of, of a weak leader before, and now he's physically not even there to lead the country. So I think, as you said, the next 6 months will be definitely much more significant. Let's break the issues down one by one. I want to start, obviously, with the war in Israel, between Israel and the Islamic Republic's various proxies. Since October 7th, this war has only seen escalation. Let's leave the information and the propaganda war and the misinformation, disinformation war aside. Let's talk about what's going on actually in the Middle East. What do you make of this situation where Israel is actually waiting for the Islamic Republic to strike? At the same time, I just saw this as I was waiting for our show to start, where we have the Axios reporter in Israel, Barak Ravid, a solid reporter. He quotes White House spokesman John Kirby saying, "We have information that Iran is preparing to attack Israel, and that it could happen without warning, without significant notice. We are working to prevent this." I mean, how damaging is it to come out and A, blast our ally, but B, give our collective enemy a notice?
Yeah, Lisa, it's absolutely maddening. And really, this has been stretching on now for over 2 weeks. Every 24 to 48 hours, there's an attack that's imminent, supposedly, out of Iran and its proxies. Look, I think the point we're at right now with the Biden administration is they're tying Israel's hands. And I say that, I think it's pretty clear. I say that because, look, Israel very well could have and perhaps should have struck preemptively by now. Why sit around for over 2 weeks and wait to be attacked? I think we have a situation here where the Biden administration is saying, look, if you go on the offensive, we won't have your back. But look, we will help you defend against an attack. Obviously, Lisa, April 13th, that unprecedented Iranian barrage, over 300 projectiles.
Right.
99% of them intercepted. The U.S. had a big hand in that with missile defense helping Israel. And I think the Biden administration is kind of wielding that, holding that over Israel's head and saying, if you go on the offensive, we're out. But look, we'll help you negate this Iranian attack. It's insane because historically, Lisa, if you look back, I look at the 6-Day War. Israel did not wait as enemies were gathering on its borders. There was a lot of buildup, much like we have now. Egypt, Syria, the world knew it was coming. Israel struck first, resounding victory. Contrast that with the Yom Kippur War a few years later. Israel waited, was attacked. It got very dicey. Israel ultimately prevailed, but it was a costly victory. So I think we see the parallels today as well. And in 1967, Lyndon Johnson trying to tie Israel's hands. Israel ultimately said, you know what, we're going to do what we need to do, and they struck first. Not sure we'll see that in this case, but I think Iran waiting, Lisa, they've painted themselves into a corner of the regime because now they're attacking directly. It's not just through proxy anymore, and they know that Israel may very well unleash hell this time if Iran strikes directly, and especially if Israeli civilians are killed.
You said so many important things that I wish we had 5 hours to unpack, but I really want to get to the main issue here that I think people wonder about all the time. And, even with all my sources, I'm hearing two very different versions of how this goes down. Obviously, I mean, we can all agree that since October 7th, the United States, the Biden administration has tied Israel's hand and not allowed them to do what we perceive as would be the course of action that they would like to take, decisive action, right, to defeat Hamas, which has been their primary goal. I mean, when I talk to some Israelis in the intelligence arena, they tell me, we do what we need to do because it's an existential threat. On the other hand, people like you and I, day in and day out, have been talking about the vulnerability and how damaging the daylight has been between, Jerusalem and Washington, and how, that has affected Israel's response. What's your take?
No, I think the daylight is a disaster, Lisa. Absolutely. Because the Iranian regime, and by extension, its allies, China, Russia, they know that the reason Israel isn't doing more, that Israel's holding back in the north, for instance, with Hezbollah, hasn't decisively dealt with Hezbollah yet, despite some 80,000 at least Israelis in the north evacuated. The north is a ghost town right now. They know that Israel delayed the Rafah offensive, and they know that Israel pulled its punches in its response to April 13th and that Iranian onslaught because the U.S. is tying their hands.
Right.
And that's why Iran is emboldened right now. Look, Lisa, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now, I think, if there was a forceful response to the April 13th barrage. Instead, Israel, look, it was limited, obviously. They struck a strategic site in Natanz near the nuclear facility there in Iran to send a message, but it wasn't the kind of strong deterrent message that needed to be sent. Now Iran says, look, we got away with it. Why not try it again? And we know, the mullahs know that the U.S. is tying Israel's hands. So that emboldens them to push the envelope because they're saying, you know what, we can strike Israel and the U.S. will restrain Israel from responding in a meaningful way. I think that's part of their calculus right now, and it's an absolute disaster.
Working in this field for as long as you have and having the perspective and access to the sources that you have had, a lot of people wonder, with all of these, the evidence we have, right? I mean, do we need more evidence to know that the regime in Iran is working against all of us here in the West, right? We just had an attack on our Iraq base. We had some, injured U.S. military personnel there. There's so many. There are American hostages being held by Hamas. There's so much American blood on their hands, where one sits and scratches one's head and says, why is it that this administration continually wants to make nice with an enemy, with a rogue element like the mullahs in Iran, but yet has thrown Israel, our democratic ally, under the bus?
Yeah, and it's a strange obsession. You and I discussed it on my show, Stakelbeck Tonight, the other day, Lisa, and you brought up, look, this stretches back to the Obama administration. Think of the Green Revolution in 2009, where Barack Obama literally said, well, we don't want to meddle. We weren't calling for U.S. military intervention during the Green Revolution. It was a tear down this wall moment. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Even just some rhetoric, some forceful rhetoric in support of the Iranian opposition. We couldn't even get that from the Obama administration. So this obsession with striking a deal with the mullahs stretches back over 15 years now. And it's really tough to figure it out. It's an appeasement-minded approach, clearly, which never works. History shows that clearly. But this administration, like the Obama administration before it, Lisa, it's committed to a new Iran nuclear deal, to appeasing the Iranian regime. I think it gets to the root of their priorities in that they're very focused on, in their words, fundamentally transforming America and internally and domestically and culturally. I think by and large for them, foreign policy and national security are almost a distraction. And they're saying to the Iranian regime, look, we'll give you whatever you want. Just leave us alone. Just don't hurt us. We'll give you billions of dollars. We'll debase ourselves in front of the world. Just leave us alone because we have an election to win in November. I think I'm sad to say that's the line of thinking among the left today in America.
Right. You know, and it won't be a distraction if it hits us here in the homeland. Speaking of which, many people are warning that the environment is ripe for another 9/11 scale attack. What do you think?
Look, Lisa, I look at our southern border, and it's a flashing neon sign to jihadi groups around the world. Enter, and not enter at your risk. Just enter. I was in Eagle Pass a few months ago, Lisa, doing some investigative work down there and talking to Border Patrol officers who were beleaguered, Eagle Pass, Texas. And they said, look, Eric, it's not just Central America. We're in a new phase now. We have people from dozens of countries crossing the border every day in large numbers, places like Yemen, China, Iran, Somalia, adversaries of the United States. We don't know where they're going, where they're ending up, who they are, what their track record is. I think the border is an absolute disaster waiting to happen. It's happening already in many ways, but in terms of the terror threat, Lisa, it's again a flashing neon sign to the likes of Hezbollah, for instance, to the Iran.
Exactly right.
Come on in. So look,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about the Iran proxies, right? The regime's proxies. So Hezbollah, Hamas being, and Houthis being the groups that are talked about most. But you have a book on the Muslim Brotherhood. You have a book on ISIS. How are those groups doing? Are they retreating and planning and plotting? Or is it more of this, the ISIS 2.0 type of terror where it's do-it-yourself type of jihad, where if you ram a car into a certain group of people or you run, a suicide bomber into a Taylor Swift concert, you're going to heaven anyway. Give us your, global assessment of how these groups are doing, how far they've progressed. Are they growing? Are they shrinking? How bad is the war on terror right now?
Well, I think number one, you said it, Lisa, the Shia axis, head of the snake, the Iranian regime, Hezbollah, Houthis, definitely still, I think, the main concern in terms of global terror and the ability to wreak mass carnage. You have clearly through Hezbollah, Iran, its agents, and the Houthis, look, more of a regional threat, but a serious threat. But the Sunni jihad that you mentioned, personified by the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, I would say in terms of the ISIS threat, I don't see them, Lisa, although they are certainly gaining strength in Afghanistan in terms of ISIS-K. And again, the disastrous withdrawal in August 2021 certainly helped that to happen. And we see the Taliban just this week parading U.S. military hardware through the streets of Afghanistan. But ISIS, I don't know that they can reconstitute a caliphate, a physical caliphate. At one time, Lisa, I think it was 58,000 square miles in Iraq and Syria that ISIS controlled. Donald Trump, like him or don't like him, he kept his promise. And he crushed that ISIS caliphate in short order. I don't know that the ISIS jihadis can reconstitute a physical caliphate. But in the meantime, Lisa, you mentioned it, I think ISIS 2.0, the so-called lone wolf attacks where you have people inspired online, and we've seen this for years now in the West, inspired online, carrying out attacks. We saw the Taylor Swift plot just broken up last week. So I think that is rising. And I think that the jihad on college campuses, and these are pro-jihad demonstrators, pro-Hamas, I think that could be I'm sad to say, an active recruiting pool for these jihadi groups as well. These pro-Hamas mobs, it's a dangerous thing. This unholy alliance of the radical left and radical Islamist, but these pro-Hamas mobs, that could end up being a conveyor belt, I fear, Lisa, for terror on Western soil. In terms of the Muslim Brotherhood, look, they took a blow, obviously, the mothership when Sisi came to power and Morsi was overthrown 11 years ago now, hard to believe, during the so-called Arab Spring. But the Brotherhood still, in terms of, again, look at these protests on college campuses, in terms of the ideological purveyors and the ideological inspiration, again, this alphabet soup of American Islamist groups continues to drive the agenda there. And they certainly have a hand in stirring
Hmm.
up madness, not only on college campuses, but in the streets of major American cities. So the Sunni jihad, it may have seemed kind of dormant over the past several years as the Iranian axis became ascendant, but still very, very much a threat. And they smell weakness and opportunity now. And they're using the war, against Israel kind of as a recruiting tool. And the
Right.
radical, again, is piling right in with them.
And you made such a great point about ISIS, being this Islamic state that so many people were fearful of. They did such a great PR job in terms of getting their name out there, where the real Islamic State is actually the Islamic Republic, where 45 years ago, they set out to create a caliphate. They set out to export their version of Shiite Islam throughout the region. And they did a superb job because the West just ushered them in and normalized them. And here we are, right?
Mhm.
You made so many great points also about recruitment here in the West. That's a big issue for us, and I think that will far outlast the military war in the Middle East. How did it happen that they were which came first? Was it this anti-Americanism that then became pro jihad, or was it this pro jihad element that came in and then made this student body, whatever you want to call them, these useful idiots? How did this
Yeah.
happen? It couldn't have been an overnight evolution of this bracket of young people that have been brainwashed. How did this happen?
No, at least a great point. I think really this stretches back, gosh, the early 1960s even. We had some American Islamist groups kind of getting entrenched in American college campuses. So the Muslim Brotherhood Network, the so-called soft Islamist, have had a presence on
Hmm.
American college campuses for decades. But in terms of right now, the moment we're in right now, how does it happen? I think the anti-Americanism that is latent, not only in
Hmm.
the university system, at the middle school level, at the high school level in our public schools across America, I'm sad to say right now, has really
Right.
helped lay the groundwork for that. And by the time kids get to these elite universities, they're already steeped in an anti-American, they would call it anti-colonialist worldview. And they're
Right.
attracted to the Islamists on campus who are wearing keffiyehs and covering their faces and yelling death to Israel and waving Hamas and Hezbollah flags because they're not Western. These students have been taught that the West is a horrible colonialist, slave-holding
Right.
place, and they're attracted to anything that is not that. There is a shared desire to bring down Judeo-Christian Western civilization. That's why these
Hmm.
very strange bedfellows, on the surface at least, are attracted to each other. So I think for a young anarchic radical leftist on campus, they're attracted to the radical Islamists because there's the shared goal of bringing down the system, bringing down the West, bringing down Judeo-Christian civilization as we know it. I would caution them, though, a cautionary tale. And Lisa, you know this very well, better than anyone, that many of the communists and socialists in Iran backed the Ayatollah in the early days, and the tide turned against them pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, the left are useful idiots. We see them as that, but so do the Islamists. They see the
Right.
left as useful idiots for their cause. It can be used and then eventually cast away. I think of Queers for Palestine, which
Mhm.
last 10 minutes in Gaza, for instance.
Absolutely. I mean, it's crazy because it's just such a misinformed, idea. This romanticization of these jihadi cultures. What's ironic, Eric, is I just posted the story this morning. Is how you're seeing such a trend inside Iran among Iranians to convert to Christianity. I mean, it's really the world is flip flopped, right? You see all these, the kids here are young people, and there's a lot of people who are older than that, but trying to like run away from our Judeo Christian values, totally, oppose them,
Yeah.
totally belittle them, and stand against them. While you have Iranians who don't have freedom and they want to worship and they want to have a connection with the Lord, but they don't have a proper way to do so. And again, by Sharia law, turning away from Islam is punishable by death. So literally risking their lives to find Christianity and to convert to Islam. On that note, I actually want to talk about something very important, and this is entirely your realm at TBN. So the greatest ally for Israel has always been the Christian community. Um, and I'm not saying that they're not still the greatest ally, but there have been some shifts.
Yeah.
There's been a loss of support, particularly in this newer generation. So I talk to a lot of parents, and many of them find themselves to be, in the Hispanic community, African American community, living in blue cities, for example, or sending their kids to college, where the parents and families are church going. They have an affiliation, they're believers, but now their children don't have that connection. The children are questioning. The children are watching, legacy media and social media, and and it's TikTok and Instagram. And that's where they're getting in their information, or from their friends. And either they're wearing the kafiyas or they're questioning why there's such a genocide. Even with our episode on YouTube, which again, I suggest everybody go check it out, because it's a very just like this, it's a conversation between two colleagues who have really witnessed a lot of this evolution or growth in this pro jihad movement inside America. Even in our conversation in YouTube, there's so many wonderful comments, but there are also people who are saying yes, but. And that but is to question Israel and the way that it is, just basically drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
So, Erick, how do we tackle this? How do we undo the damage that has been done to the Christian community? Really, the hijacking of the young Christian mind, and really, how do we correct this narrative going forward?
Well, Lisa, you just really put it well. The hijacking of the young Christian mind. I'm sad to say, I can't agree more. This is a serious, serious problem. I'd say starting in the millennial generation in particular, certainly Generation Z. And you mentioned TikTok. I cannot overstate the power of TikTok in shaping young American minds right now and young Western minds. There needs to be a concerted effort, I think, among the pro-Israel community to raise up a new generation, to really, I don't know if the words train them, but educate young kids and show.
Hmm.
I mean, to me, on one hand, Lisa, it's very frustrating because I say this is common sense. It's good versus evil. To me, I look at what happened, this demonic onslaught on October 7th. That's evil. There should be no discussion. It's very black and white. There's no gray
Right.
areas here. This was a genocide carried out by purely evil savages against the people of Israel. So it's frustrating in that sense, in that you feel like I shouldn't even have to explain this. It's so obvious for all the world to see what happened.
Right.
And yet we live in times where common sense is not so common. So there has
Right.
to be a way for us and I know there's organizations doing that right now. There's pro-Israel organizations who are doing this, and in the Christian space in particular, doing it. There needs to be more of it. I know it almost
See,
sounds
see,
simplistic, but
No, yeah, but let's be honest with each other, because we want this to be, we want to be constructive going forward. Do
yeah,
you think, and I don't know the answer to this, you know the answer to this, because you're inside, an organization that promotes Christian values, so you see other, platforms that do the same. Do you think the Christian leaders and organizations, do you think some of them have tried to play both sides, have tried to take that, well, both sides matter, kids on both sides, and all of that is true. But what it does is it creates daylight again. So we're doing basically what the Biden administration is doing, except it's not in terms of policy, but it's in terms of perspective and shaping opinions.
agreed. And I think you could take it back further, even to the Black Lives Matter riots in 2020. It was kind of all sides matter.
Hmm,
That kind of
interesting. Yeah.
well seeped into some leaders in the church, who I would boil it down to, Lisa. Look, as a Christian and as a church, I feel like we should stand apart. We should stand apart from what we would call the world. But there's, I think, an inclination among some to want to be liked. I want to be
Mm,
liked. I don't want to be
hmm.
controversial. I don't want people to
Right.
to blast me on
Right.
X and call me an extremist, et cetera, and a Christian nationalist and all these crazy
Right.
terms. So there's this
Right.
tendency to want to be liked, and that leads to
Mhm.
compromising your beliefs and your values. Yes, I agree with you. We do see that. But I'll say, Lisa, as a Christian, a friend once said this to me: if you can't get Israel right, man, there's not much you can get right, because I just see it. I know there's nuance and everything, but it's very black and white. Israel is the lone democracy in the Middle East. It's a bastion
Mhm.
of Western values,
Right.
tolerance,
Right.
a free and open society,
Right.
literally being opposed by evil tyrants who hate America as well.
Mhm.
To me,
Right.
it's very clear. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of gray areas here. And,
Yeah.
some people said about the college protesters, quote unquote, well, you know, they're 20, 18, 19, 20, 21. And I did dumb stuff when I was a college kid too. I heard some people say,
Did you? I don't believe that, Eric.
wait, it's madness, Lisa, right? Look, when I was 18, I did dumb things, but I knew the difference between right and wrong. I knew
Mhm.
murder and evil when I saw it.
Mhm.
There's no excuse for these young
Right.
people now. I think it goes to a deeper root, Lisa, where something is rotten in the United States and the Western
Mhm.
world right now. There's a moral rot somewhere along the way. These younger generations have lost their way, and I think
Right.
in many cases, the so-called adults in the room have completely abdicated their responsibility, and I think that's the root
Yeah.
cause.
Absolutely, and, they think they're the ones who are pro-human rights and pro-right. They
Yeah,
it's all it's a huge misinformation and propaganda campaign, as you know.
no
The
doubt.
you know, the thing that's I interesting to me is whenever you meet a Christian who is pro-Israel, they quickly say, "Well, I was brought up evangelical." Or if you talk to the Jewish community that is looking for support, and many times I have given talks and I say, well, the Christian community is the biggest ally for Israel and the Jewish people, everyone will just say, well, you're talking about the evangelicals. I mean,
Yeah.
is there a way to broaden the tent, so to speak, because everyone loves that saying nowadays? How do we bring in more partners to understand? And you and I talked about this on your show.
Yeah.
If many people will say those who bless Israel will be blessed, so that's it for them.
Yeah.
Period. Stop. That's it. That's the way they're going to live their lives, and nothing can really shake that perspective. But there are others who question what Israel's doing, the death toll, because we're going to quote Hamas on the death toll, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. Of course, you and I have always agreed that every life is precious, and we can agree on that. But outside of our religious belief towards Israel, there's also the logic, as you said. The fact that when you look at foreign policy 101, there is no reason why the United States and Israel should not always be ironcladly, just aligned, lock and step. There's no question about it. So,
Yeah.
is there a way to, whether it's through logic, foreign policy, or through, just belief, in the Bible, to
Yeah.
bring in a bigger constituency of Christians for the future?
Yeah, Lisa, I'm so glad you asked. I think 4 points here, I think. Okay. And I'll end with the Christian perspective of it. But the first 3 points from a purely secular perspective, anyone should be able to get on board with these points and see why they should stand with Israel. Number one, you and I have been discussing it here, Lisa. Israel is truly the first line of defense for Western civilization. If Israel
Right,
goes down, we all go down. Israel is
right,
standing in the gap, holding back the floodgates, fighting the good fight for us, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in the United States. So that's number one. Israel's enemies
right.
and America's enemies are one and the same. So that should, number one, motivate any American of any religious persuasion or political persuasion to stand steadfastly with Israel. Number two, Israel, again, is a beacon of Western values in the heart of the Middle East. Look, it's an open, tolerant, free, diverse society. Jerusalem, I would argue, Lisa, may very well be the most diverse city in the world.
Right, and
Not
people
only
don't know that.
people
Absolutely.
don't know it. And Israel itself, you have Arabs, Muslims, Jews of every shade from around the world, Sephardic, Ashkenazi. It's an amazing, vibrant place. And in terms of the Arab population, Arab Israelis are the most prosperous Arabs in the entire region. Arab
Mhm.
Israeli Christians in particular, and these are Arab citizens of the state of Israel who vote in elections freely. We have Arab members of the Knesset, Lisa, who actually on the Knesset floor basically call for the demise of the Jewish state, and yet they are still permitted to serve in the Knesset. We have Arab judges. We could go on and on.
Mhm.
Look at the Druze members, for instance, of the
Right.
IDF, who've risen in the ranks in the military. Israel is an amazing, vibrant, open, and tolerant society. And when you want to talk about democracy, 4 elections in the span, or was it 5 elections in the span of 4 years? That's pretty much the height of democracy. When you
Right.
have election after
Too much democracy, right?
yeah, right, for better or for worse, right? And Lisa, also look, number three, Israel is a mini Silicon Valley in the heart of the desert. It is a blooming, booming scientific, technological, medical powerhouse. And the incredible ingenuity of the Jewish people has been harnessed in this one tiny land, the size of the state of New Jersey, and literally blessing the world. And I, as a proud American, I'll still say this: if there's a cure for cancer or Alzheimer's found in
Hmm.
the next few years, I believe it will be found in Israel. So Israel is
Right.
blessing the world. So these are all common sense, secular minded reasons why anyone should stand with Israel. The fourth reason, look, this is simple. And I like to joke about it. I said, well, because the Bible says so. That's why I support Israel. But in all seriousness, if you are a Bible believer like I am, and I do believe the word of God, it's all there. And God is a promise keeping God. He made promises to the Jewish people and the people of Israel, and he keeps his promises, and those
Right.
promises are eternal. That's my view.
Amazing. And in the Bible, you could look at it as a historical document as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think that's it's perfectly laid out, and there you have it, folks. No one can break it down like you do, Eric.
Oh, thank
Read his books, subscribe to his YouTube channel, watch him on TBN Tonight, and Stakelbeck Tonight is the name of the show, and on YouTube, The Watchman. What did I miss, Eric?
Man, I think you covered it. WatchmanTV.com is a YouTube channel, and awesome, awesome interview with Lisa. Me interviewing Lisa the other day. We hope you check out.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to converse with you, to really get a chance to hear your expertise. I know you're the one usually asking the questions, but you usually know more than your guests do, which is amazing to hear you and your perspective. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your courage, what you stand for, and thank you for joining us here on the Foreign Desk. You are always welcome to come back.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it so much. Keep up the great work. God bless.
Thank you. For those of you who'd like to subscribe to our weekly podcast, go to youtube.com/Lisa Daftari, and you can catch us on foreigndesknews.com. Subscribe to our daily top 10 email over there and all throughout social media. Until next time.